Hey, for everybody who is hopping on, welcome. We're glad you're here. We're going to wait just about a minute to give everybody a chance to connect, and then we'll get started.
And those of you that need closed captioning, it's down below. So feel free to click on that.
In case you're wondering where you are, this is Every Parent Needs to Process.
And we're having trouble with the clicker again. Well, that's fun.
What's a breakout without a little IT terror?
Yeah. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So we'll have fun with that.
Okay, we need to make sure everyone's able to see the interpreter. Can you see the interpreter? You don't have gallery on your iPad. Okay. Nathaniel, our IT guy, can help us with this. Rosie is requesting an interpreter, and our IT guy says that he is working on it for you, Rosie. So just hang tight. Thank you for letting us know. We're up to 23 participants, so we'll give it just a little bit more time. And we'll get started. All right. Yeah, under view options, that's what Nathaniel's talking about up on the top of your screen there, Rosie. All right, Debbie, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to get this breakout started. So first, we just want to do quick introductions. My name is Amy Blakesley, and I'm very excited to be here. And my pronouns are she, her, and I identify as gay. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I love coffee. So I have background working with parents and family of LGBTQ plus individuals, and love them. And so I'm looking forward to having this conversation tonight.
And I'm Debbie Kazi. My pronouns are she, her. I identify as straight, I guess. I am a parent of a gay son that's 25. And Amy and I led a ministry together called Parent Connect, where we met with and not dealt with, but interacted with lots of parents whose kids were coming out.
We dealt with you guys. You guys are just awful.
And so, you know, my reason for being here is just my love for my son and just the LGBTQ plus community, and that I've gotten to know through the years. So yeah, that's us.
Great. Thanks, Debbie. Well, we're going to get started, and we just want to clarify that this breakout is geared for really anybody who loves an LGBTQ plus person. So that could be a parent, that could be a pastor, that could be a friend, that could be an ally, an extended family member. And if you're LGBTQ plus yourself, we want to welcome you as well and hope that you can find this beneficial in many ways as well. So we're going to start things out with a quick survey. And we're going to use the screen here, so pay attention to that. And it's going to, Debbie, do you want to walk them through the instructions for this?
Yeah, so we're just going to want you to pull out your phones. I think you can do this with your iPad as well. This will also be your screen, and it will show you the slides on this as well. But if you'll go to mentimeter.com and use the code 2761618, where it says code. This is a little survey we're going to be doing with you guys. Plus, it will allow you to see the slides on your phone. And so it will also allow you to have this presentation for future. So go to mentimeter.com and use code 2761618. I can't tell.
And there's a 6 on the end.
And a 6 on the end. You should see the numbers there. And I think you click vote to the right of the code, and that will allow us to, take in your responses to this survey. So give you a second to do that.
So, yep. And go ahead, and it's mentimeter.com, and you can write down that code real quick because we're going to keep moving. So want to make sure everybody has that code. So if you're tech challenged like I am, just write it down with an old-fashioned piece of paper and a pen, and then you can keep up that way, okay? All right, so we're going to get into the questions. So this is really for us to gather some information about who is here, and also maybe just be helpful for how it directs our conversation a little bit. All right, so question number 1, we want to know who is with us today, or tonight, I should say. And your options there are parents, pastors, helpers, or an LGBTQ plus individual. So let us know who's watching tonight. Okay, we've got 24 participants, so we're going to wait a minute because I'm going to assume that you guys are still getting it up on your phones. So just thanks for your patience with the technology. We got lots of parents, a couple of helpers, one LGBTQ plus individual. Okay, let's go on to question number 2. Which letter best represents your loved one or yourself? LGBTQ or the plus? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, and then the plus would be anything in addition to that we don't have room on the screen. Okay. Yeah, we've got a good representation. That's awesome. Great. And it's good for you guys to know who you're watching with as well. All right, let's go on to the next question. This is kind of tongue in cheek, but which of these coping mechanisms has quote unquote helped you through this process the most? Got some Netflix fans. Okay. Wow, one of our attendees has 4 children, each with a different letter. That is amazing. Those are 4 lucky children.
Wow.
That's amazing. We're glad you're here.
And nobody copes with wine, or nobody's admitting to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's always somebody with the wine, but not tonight.
I don't believe you.
Is this a Baptist conference? What's going on? Am I at the right conference? Just kidding. All right, let's go on to the next one. Who has been the safest for you on your journey? Friends, family, church, online support, or other.
Mm.
And if you want to write in the text box who the other is, that would be very interesting to know if you're willing to share. Okay. Oh, you with the other one, you cope with busyness. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So friends have played an important role. Other is a spouse. Thank you for sharing.
Interesting how no one has church, huh? We're going to talk about that a little bit.
Yep, we're going to talk about that. All right, let's go on to the next one. Thank you guys for, now what is this? Okay, there we have one attendee who, thank you for your vulnerability there. You have not shared with anyone yet. So this is a big deal that you're here. So thank you. All right, what stage of grief? Now this is assuming that, there are some attendees that are in the grief process. If you're not, that's okay too, but we're going to be talking about grief tonight. So just share with us to the best of your self-awareness. Where would you put yourself if you are grieving in the grieving process? Okay, we have a lot of attendees who are in the acceptance category, which is amazing to see for your kids. That's great. Okay. Unsure. Thank you for sharing that. Unsure about it. Okay. Thank you guys. Okay. Thanks for sharing about your grief. More specifically, that's really helpful to know how to talk about this. All right. This one, kind of fun. If you could have one superpower to help you on your journey, which one would you choose? It could be a blessing and a curse. Yeah, so some would like to go back and maybe do things a little differently. And others would like to currently know what their child is thinking or what their loved one is thinking. So that's just kind of a fun one. All right, next one. This is a, how would you categorize your loved one or your child and their faith specifically? Are they questioning? Have they left? Or are they doing great? And I know it's probably not this cut and dry and black and white, but generally speaking. Okay. So a lot of questioning. It's good to know some are doing great. A couple have left the faith. Okay. All right, let's do our last one. If you could push a button that made your LGBTQ loved one straight, would you push it?
The opposite gender?
That's a good point. Or a different gender, would you push it? I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but okay. So far it's unanimous. Okay, we have one who would say, yeah, I would push it. And then 11 who would say no. That's really interesting. Most of the time when I ask this question to a large number of parents, almost every single parent says, yeah, I would push it, because they want their child to have a life free of homophobia and assault and other things that they have to be fearful of. So, but that's great to see that 11 of you, and I think that reflects the acceptance stage that we saw in the grief. So thank you all for participating. That just helps us kind of inform how we're going to go through tonight. So we're just going to jump right in, and we're basically going to be covering three main topics tonight that we believe through our work with the parents that we've had the privilege of working with in Parent Connect, that these just were common cyclical themes that every parent had to work through at some level. So the first one we're going to talk about is safety. So I'm going to start with an obvious statement here, is that it is true that we as people gravitate towards people that love us. We gravitate towards people that care about us. We gravitate towards people that we like. And on the opposite side of that coin is we avoid people that want to try to change us. We avoid people that want to argue with us. We avoid people that are just mean. And so the question is, these are obvious statements, but why do we do that? What is it that makes us gravitate towards one type of person and try to avoid another type of person? And the key ingredient that we want to talk about tonight is this idea of safety. It's this idea of safety. So our first slide says being a safe person in a relationship guarantees the best chance at emotional connection. It doesn't guarantee it, but it guarantees the best chance at emotional connection. So that's what you all want, right? If I'm going to make an assumption, is that you all want a positive emotional connection with your LGBTQ plus loved one, okay? So ultimately, this connection that we all want really does not stem from counseling. It really does not stem from quality time with your loved one. It doesn't stem from spending lots of time with them, learning to communicate better, all these things we work at. Because the next slide goes to that point. It says, without safety in relationships, all the work we do on anything else is really a complete waste of time. It really is. All those other things are important to work on, but if you have all those things and are not safe in the eyes of your LGBTQ plus loved one, then they're not really going to be effective. The foundation of your emotional attachment to your LGBTQ plus loved one is going to be safety. So that leads us to the next question is, how do you be safe? So we start here. Safety might require, probably will require, as Debbie can attest to, it requires us to filter ourselves and deal with our emotional baggage. It requires us to filter ourselves and to deal with our emotional baggage. Now there's a big assumption here that is false. And it is this, it's that just because you are family to somebody, just because you are a best friend to somebody or a beloved pastor to somebody does not guarantee or make you safe. A lot of family members can think that it's like, well, because we're family, we don't have to have a filter. We can be who we are. And at the end of the day, we hug it out and it's safe. And that is very not true in most cases. Being family, being related does not guarantee safety, does not create safety. And I can use my own family as an example, because they love me. I have no doubt about their love. But you will see in some of the characteristics of safe versus unsafe people that we're going to show you that it is very possible to love somebody and also be very unsafe without this self-awareness of the need to filter and deal with emotional baggage. So with that, we're going to go over just a few of the characteristics of unsafe people versus safe people. There's about 5 or 6 of them. The first one is here. So unsafe people tend to react in anger, while safe people practice self-control. Some of these situations, you're going to feel feelings internally, and that's okay. But being a safe person will require you at times, and potentially many times, especially early on as you're working through things, to practice a lot of self-control for the sake of your LGBTQ plus loved one. Next slide. An unsafe person avoids issues. And this is one of the things that my family does. Won't proactively ask questions, won't bring it up, won't talk about it. I had one mom whose son came out, and because of her religious legalistic upbringing, did not talk to her child about the coming out for 10 years. So talk about avoiding the issue. It's very unsafe versus a safe person who's going to address the issues, even if they're difficult. The next characteristic of an unsafe person is they tend to shut down. It's fight or flight, and this is the flight. even emotionally, mentally, even physically, sometimes they'll leave, but they can shut down, versus a safe person will stay engaged and be self-aware enough to know when they're wanting to shut down, and they will work against that to stay engaged with their loved one. The next one, an unsafe person criticizes feelings, whether it's, they feel threatened by the feelings that their loved one is communicating, but they will criticize feelings. And we all know that feelings are not good or bad, they're just neutral. So a safe person will allow this person in their presence to feel their feelings. They will express empathy with what their loved one is sharing with them. And I think there's one more. Is there one more? Last one? Yeah. An unsafe person uses really unhealthy communication. They could speak in sarcasm, they could gaslight, they could blame. There's different things, ways that can look, but in their speech and in their communication, it can be very unsafe, versus a safe person who's going to speak words of life and not use those very destructive communication patterns. So those are just some examples of unsafe versus safe. And we all want to be a safe place for our LGBTQ plus loved ones. The truth is, we all tend to overestimate our safeness. So we have a fun exercise that Debbie's going to lead you through to take a little inventory of how safe we actually are.
So on your WOVA app, you will see a handout that you will want to pull up right now. And this is a checklist, and some of you may want to wait to do this later, but we thought it could be really helpful for you to look through this checklist. This checklist pretty much tells you whether others would consider you a safe person or not. As you go through this, there's two different opposing sides, and you're going to want to answer this according to how your loved one would answer this, not necessarily how you would answer this. And Amy, I can't actually see the exercise, so I don't know if you can pull it up to be able to share like the two opposite sides, but you're just going to want to make sure that it's how somebody would refer to you, not how you would necessarily refer to yourself. So we just want you to take a few minutes to check off what your loved one would say is true about you.
Someone is asking about if they don't have the app.
If you will message us, we can make sure you get it. We won't be able to get it to you right this minute, but we will be able to get it to you. So I don't know if there's a way to put it in the chat. It's just a very helpful exercise later on or that you can use later on too, as well, just to see, hey, I might really think I'm a safe person, but I'm not, or I'm actually a safer person than I thought I was.
Mm-hmm. If you can't access it now, we can make sure that QCF can make it available as well.
Yeah.
Later, so you can print it out and do it. And somebody's saying the handout is also available on the Whova page for the session at the bottom under handouts. I didn't know that. So it's available there as well.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, they got it.
Okay.
Sorry if it's confusing, but we'll get it to either now or you can access it later to take it on your own time as well.
Yeah. So I know many of you are probably not finished with that, but the two questions that you're going to want to ask yourself after is, where have I been a safe person? And where have I been an unsafe person? And when we talk about application in a minute, we'll talk about how to kind of make some changes when it comes to those kind of things. But those give you actual ways to be a safe person for your loved one.
There's also somebody just posted a link in the chat box. If you guys want to try clicking on that link, it might take you to the safety checklist. Thank you guys for your help. We need all the help we can get.
Everybody takes such good care of us.
Thank you.
So, Amy has shared examples and characteristics of what makes a person safe, but let's find out what maybe some of your loved ones would say about you. At Parent Connect, this ministry that Amy and I lead, we surveyed the LGBT folks. The parents were there, but we focused on their children and we surveyed them. And so we asked them some questions and we have some of the responses, which were just really fascinating and so helpful to us as parents to know how our kids feel. So the very first question we asked them was, what is one thing one or both of your parents does that allows you to feel safe to open up to them emotionally? And what we got as a response from some of them was, when they remind me that nothing I can do will stop them from loving me. It's really important for each person, whether you're LGBTQ or not, to know that you are loved by another person. So one of the most important things in safety would be for you to tell them that you love them no matter what. The second person put, having the assurance that I'm loved regardless of how my experiences as an LGBT plus individual might differ from their expectations, their personal views, or hopes that they had for me. This is another person that mentions love. One more question we asked them is, what is one thing one or both of your parents does that causes you to feel unsafe to open up to them? And so some of the responses we got were, they love the sinner, hate the sin, where my sin is something completely out of my control. I feel like they see me as something broken. Another person put, avoiding any topic or subject involving my partner, even when it's something mundane. Oftentimes our LGBTQ loved ones feel very much like they're being avoided, that not talking about subjects is just as harmful as having negative responses to those subjects to some of our loved ones. The next question that we asked them was, what is one thing one or both of your parents could do to be safer for you in the relationship? And some of the answers we got were, if you have a concern or question, then talk to me. If you're crossing a line, I'll let you know. Making me feel out of place with you just makes me feel distant and alone. Another person put, make it apparent that I'm loved for who I am, not despite who I am. It's really important. Many of our LGBTQ plus folks would tell you that their label or their identity is only part of who they are. It's part of the definition. It's not the definition of who they are. So including that in your conversations. Another person put, knowing that they don't have a specific agenda, but are trying to understand my perspective and experiences. So this is something that you can do to be safe, is just to allow them to know that. I think it's the last question. Is there anything else you would like to tell us about when it comes to how we can be safer people for one another? Being unconditionally loving and accepting goes a long way. Judgment, shame is what is feared our whole life. It's probably best to be aware of this as possible. in the counseling field, I'm a licensed therapist, and when we look at different counselees and what they bring to the table, more often than not, with the LGBTQ plus community, they deal with shame. It is above all the most consistent issue that people come in to counseling with. So this is something we all want to be aware of and not add to it. And we did have one more question we asked them because we want to leave with some encouragement. We asked them, do you have any words of encouragement for parents as they navigate this journey of becoming a safer person for their LGBTQ plus kids like you? Let's see here. I know it's hard. I've had a lot of time to wrestle with the issues that my parents have because it's just been a daily thing for me, even before my parents knew. There's a learning curve and a coming out process for both children or both kids and parents. But if there's love and listening and not always having to have an answer or a prescription to a problem, then things get better and everyone learns to love. I can't see.
Love each other better.
Yeah, learns to love each other better. If you are struggling to accept and digest your child's sexuality, please know you're not misunderstood and your stance is not ignored. If you are reading this, you have already put yourself in a position to be a safer person for your kid. I love that one. That is way more than so many others can bring themselves to do. So thank you for seeking education and thank you for doing the hard thing and working through this journey. And then lastly, asking questions, being open to talk and listening makes me feel loved and supported. Even if your child doesn't seem to appreciate it, we do. It may be difficult for us to verbalize appreciation for the support due to pain or shame. So, there's a lot of key elements here in, love and, stop the judgment and watch out for the shame and accepting your son or daughter or non-binary loved one as for who they are. But our kids aren't the only ones that we need to be safe for or that need safe people in their lives. We also need that too. And I think we forget about this. We often don't realize that the people that surround us can be safe or unsafe. And, we can lose a lot of friends over this. I lost a lot of friends, more because I chose to, because they were unsafe for me to be around and for me to share with. These would be people that I respected and thought they would be the greatest, most supportive people in every area of my life. And then my son came out and I started sharing it. And all of a sudden I saw that there was one area where they were different. And so I had to choose an inner circle. And I think each of us needs to really focus on, we probably need to have an inner circle. And these are people that we can trust, people that have compassion for us, and people that give us their presence. There's our cheerleader friends who just want to encourage us along. And then there's our commiserate friends who, really, really help us when we go through something tough. We want to have both in our lives, but the inner circle is more of our commiserate friends, the ones that we can really share our deepest self. So be on the lookout for that inner circle, but also, be aware of the kids and what they need around them. Like, what type of person should be surrounded by them? Not that you're always in control of who's around your loved one, but when you are in control of that, just remember they don't have a whole lot of safe people to be able to turn to. They might not have, as many as you do. So just really limiting time with unsafe people when your kids are even around could be something really helpful you can do. So to summarize, what we can do with safety here is to love your kids unconditionally. And, like it said in the answers to some of those questions, focus on the areas of improvement on the assessment. So the safety checklist, areas where, they might not think you're safe, you can focus on that. focus on the words of the kids and what they had said would be a safe person and not a safe person. And then make sure to surround yourself and your kids with safe people. These are all things that we can do to become safer individuals for our LGBT loved ones. Amy, did you want to talk about the next thing that we need to process?
Yes. So the next thing we're going to talk about is grief. And I know that based on the Mentimeter, a lot of you have are in the acceptance portion of, or the acceptance stage of your healing. So I would encourage you, if that is you, I think this content would be great for you to have as you help other parents and help other people, loved ones of LGBTQ plus individuals on their journey. Because if you're in acceptance, then you're probably at a place where you are walking with or a safe person for some other parents or other people who are not there yet. So you can listen to this content with the potential to pass it along to whoever God has in your path right now. So grief is, though, generally speaking, one major theme that most parents do experience and have to work through when their child comes out to them. So I'm going to go through this content, and we start with this. Grief is a healthy process designed by God for your healing. Be an active participant. So a couple keywords here. Grief is healthy. Doesn't feel healthy, but it is healthy. It is a process, as most or all of you know who have been through it. It can be a long process. Grief is designed by God. It is intentional. And it's healing. There is a purpose to grief, which when you're going through it it can be very encouraging to know that this is not for nothing. So there's a lot of important aspects to these two sentences. So you have the opportunity to be an active participant in your grief. So we're going to go through the 5 stages real quick, and I'm just going to give you an example of what each of these looks like. So to be aware, the first step is to be aware of your grief. You can go to the next slide. Be aware of your grief. So we're just going to quickly go through the 5 stages because I'm going to assume most of you are aware of these 5 stages. The first stage is denial. And I mentioned the mom before whose son came out and literally did not talk about it for 10 years because of her religious legalistic upbringing. She was in a lot of denial. My child can't be LGBTQ plus. I hear a lot of parents say this has got to be a phase. So that could be, an example of a parent who is in this stage of denial in their grief. The second one is anger. My child, or go to the next slide, mad at God, mad at self, mad at spouse, mad at child. Self isn't on there, but you can definitely be mad at yourself. This could look at how the example I have for this one, this dad, when his son came out, said, I just don't understand. I don't deserve this. He was angry, probably at God. But he said, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this to have to go through this. And it's very, as most of you know, it can be you have to be very focused on self and do a lot of self-care through this process. So that's how his anger manifested itself. The next one is bargaining, trying to fix it, asking questions that somehow, you can bargain with God. An example of this is, and this is a horrific example, but this is where parents are sometimes, that a dad had said, I prayed to God that he would take my child home to heaven because it would be better for him to live in heaven than to live on this earth as a gay man. And while that was really hard to hear, it's also true that parents need to be where they are so that they can move past where they are. And so that is a hard example to hear, but that is a very real example of bargaining. Then depression can come next. That can look like isolation, sadness, sleep issues, diet, lack of MOT, which is motivation. So a mom discovered that her daughter was gay. This led her to hopelessness to a point where she had to go on some medication. And I know we all have probably different feelings about medication, but short-term medication was really what helped her work through her depression when it came to this. And then, as you all know, the last phase is acceptance, that you finally get to the place where you say, my child is LGBTQ plus. I had a situation where one couple whose daughter had come out, got engaged, and was going to get married. The mom was helping her plan the wedding. She was planning to attend the wedding. The dad could not, in good conscience, attend this wedding. And so this couple was split. To his credit, the dad did counseling. He got advice. And before the wedding, he decided to reverse course and attend his daughter's wedding out of love for his daughter. But, that was a big step for him towards acceptance of having a gay daughter. So those are the phases that we go through. These are not linear phases. You can jump around in this for a good while before you get to acceptance. But you have to be aware of your grief. The second one, next slide, is to be aware of how you view your grief. It's kind of like thinking about what you think about. Be aware of how you view your grief. There's a couple different ways you can view your grief. The first one, next slide, is weakness. If I were stronger, I wouldn't feel this way, right? There's something wrong with me because I'm struggling. You can view your grief as a weakness. The second way you can view it is possibly as an annoyance, right? I don't have time to grieve. I got a busy life. This can be kind of a form of avoidance, but it's annoying. I don't like the fact that I'm grieving. And then another option, which is a more positive option, is to view your grief as necessary. I am in the process of healing. And this goes back to our first slide that says to recognize grief is a healing process. So if you are viewing your grief from a lens of weakness or annoyance, or I'm sure there's other negative ways that you can view your grief, this can actually work to lengthen or postpone or stymie your grieving process. How you view your grief can actually affect your grief process. So just to encourage you to think about how you view your grief, because if you think about it in the proper way, it can actually help you through your grieving process. The next thing to think about is to be aware of how you react to your grief. Now, this is similar, but there's different ways we can react to when we grieve. The first way is through avoidance, like I mentioned before. Somebody mentioned being busy. One of our attendees, that they kind of escape it by busyness. But you can ignore the healing process. Another thing we can do, we can react to our grief by being frustrated. Again, both of these reactions to grief can work against the actual grieving healing process. So the last way, the better way to react to your grief is acceptance. Embrace the healing process. Embrace the fact that you are in a process of grief, you are in a process of healing. And by being an active participant in your grief, by having these self-awarenesses, you can actually partner with God as He's doing this work in you to move you through the process to eventually experience acceptance, which is where a lot of you guys are. The next thing I want to mention about grief, and this is huge, is on the next slide, it says that your grief is unique. So you need unique support. That's not easy to say. Your grief is unique. So you need unique support. I'm going to give you 3 ways that your grief is unique. Number 1, you are often isolated in your grief, mainly because, like our one brave attendee here, who has not yet told anybody. It is a very isolating experience. There is nobody bringing flowers to your door. There is nobody delivering a meal to your house. There is no one putting a card in the mail because they either don't know or they feel so uncomfortable or threatened by your grief that they don't know what to do. So a lot of parents and a lot of loved ones go through, especially the early stages, very isolated in your grief. And that is much different than when you lose a loved one to death, or somebody moves away, or you lose your job, or you lose your pet. These are all losses but this is a type of loss that a lot of people don't understand. And so you will be more isolated than other forms of grief. The next one is you must protect your child from your grief. On a very deep level, this is true. A lot of parents think that they don't even get the privilege of grieving because they can't, because they have to be there for your child. But if we're really honest, this grief is continuing, and it's, most other forms of grief, you don't have to protect people from your grief. But because of the nature of what you're grieving, this could be very harmful to your LGBTQ plus loved one. So you must protect them from your own grief. That means you need other outlets for your grief. It cannot be obviously your child. And so as you get that support and help from other sources, it will allow you to have healthier interactions with your loved one. The last one, in how your grief is different, is you may never really definitively know the how. How do I have an LGBTQ plus child? How did this happen? Everybody has theories about it, nature versus nurture. There's so many different ways to process it. With other forms of grief, there's usually a definitive answer to this. How did this loss happen? How did this happen? How did this occur? But when your child comes out to you, it is very normal for parents to go through this process of questioning, how did this happen? Was it my fault? You may never know. And that is a type of grief that needs to be processed in a different way, to live with that unanswered question. So with all of these, they just require awareness and intentionality on your part, just to recognize these are three very unique aspects of your grief that are very different from other forms of grief. And so how you get support, should reflect this as you guys go through this grieving process. And I want to talk about guilt really quick, because I mentioned a lot of times when parents are trying to answer the question of how, they will blame themselves. I know Debbie did this quite a bit and probably still does to a point. It's very common, but a lot of parents, if they're honest, would say, it's easier to blame myself than to live with the not knowing. And so I'm just going to blame myself. So I want to mention the difference between two types of guilt. And I hope this helps you kind of navigate through guilt, these feelings that you might be having. And it's the difference between true guilt and false guilt. So here's the definition of true guilt. True guilt are those words and actions for which we really are responsible and can offer an apology to our child. And most parents have gone through this, where after their child comes out, they realize the things that they've said, the comments that they've made, the attitudes that they have displayed, that their child was exposed to when they were in the closet and when their parents didn't know. And so these will all start coming to mind after their child comes out or after their loved one comes out. And that is true guilt, because those words were really said, those attitudes were expressed. Yes, they were in ignorance, but it still had an effect on your child. So true guilt are things that we really are responsible for. False guilt, on the other hand, on the next slide, is defined as words and actions for which we blame ourselves but are not responsible. Examples of this is our child being LGBTQ+. It could also be our child's mental health. These are things that are not our responsibility. We did not cause these things to happen. So false guilt is just what it says. We still blame ourselves, we still feel guilty, but we are not responsible for what we are feeling guilty about. So there's an exercise that you can do that I think is really helpful for parents, is to get a piece of paper on your computer, and you can make two columns, true guilt and false guilt. And as you think about and process your guilt, start filling up those columns with those things that are really truly your responsibility and those things for which you are not responsible. And then How do you process those? They're processed quite differently. With true guilt, you're going to process it by, on the next slide, apologizing and asking for forgiveness. And I know many parents have done this, and it's meant a lot to their LGBTQ plus child or loved one. But apologize and ask for forgiveness for true guilt. For false guilt, you're going to recognize it as false guilt and release it. And you can do a balloon release. You can, do some other symbolic gesture that actually is kind of cheesy, but it really works. But the false guilt, you don't have to apologize and ask forgiveness for, because it wasn't your responsibility, but you do have to let it go, to recognize it and release it in order to be free of it. So just wanted to mention that.
What a balloon release is.
Balloon release is, you can write on a balloon after you blow it up, and it has to be helium or it'll just fall to the ground. But you can write on there the things that you're releasing that you feel guilty about through false guilt, and then just let it go up into the air and watch it float away. And it is very powerful. And there are other techniques you can use as well. So yeah, thank you. I wanted people to know what that is. So I'll just end this with a verse here for you guys of encouragement. This is Psalm 34:18. It says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." And that should be on the next slide if we're rolling through them. But just if you are going through the grieving process, just know, I hope this is encouraging to you, that there's great purpose in your grief. It is a healing process, and that you are going to get through it, not only for your own good, but for the relationship that you have with your LGBTQ plus loved one. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to Debbie, and she's really going to spend a good bit of time talking about our last topic, which I know is pertinent to a lot of you guys, about your LGBTQ plus loved one's faith journey.
Yeah. When I meet with parents, I try to tell every single one of them, because this is something I have seen for myself, that the two most fragile things with our LGBTQ plus loved ones, and really just the next generation as well, is their mental health and their faith. And many of you have shown that in the answers to the Mentimeter, that your kids are either, or your loved ones are either questioning their faith, or they've walked away from their faith. And it's really heartbreaking as a parent, because, for many of us, myself included, we care more about their faith than we do about pretty much anything else. So when they walk away or are questioning it, it can be pretty devastating. So we need to process this. We need to process faith. But not only do we process our kids' faith, this can shake our faith. I know I personally have gone through this, where my faith was very shaken by my son being gay. And it's not because he's gay, but more because he prayed for God to take it away. God didn't take it away. He didn't understand why God wouldn't change him. He would say he never experienced a relationship with God, and so, or something that God's presence. And so I would pray, Lord, make yourself known to him. Let him see that you exist. And so he didn't. So my faith was shaken by that. And so don't be surprised if, your faith goes through a crisis, or your loved one goes through a crisis of faith. There is a study that I love, done by the Marin Foundation. It was done in 2016, so it'd be very interesting to see what the statistics are today, because I'm sure they're even greater today. But one of the things they found was that 86% of LGBT people were raised in a faith community. Now, this survey was done in a secular environment. It was not done in a church. It was not done in a Christian setting. So this is actually pretty surprising that so many of our loved ones were raised in a faith community. And this is from 0 to 18. So after they turned 18, 54% left the faith community that they were raised in. And that's alarming. That is more than double the average that leave the faith. Like I said, this was done in 2016. So who knows how many more have left the faith since then. But the number one reason they gave, which is the hardest part about this, was because of a negative personal experience. Many of us get caught up with theology and we think, oh, it's because of that and answers to hard questions and things like that. But they left because it was overwhelmingly that they left because of a negative personal experience with the faith community, the church, the synagogue, whatever, the Catholic Church. And so I want to know why. I want to know what are those different negative personal experiences and how we can fix that, because my son is one that has walked away from his faith as a result of not being able to reconcile that God is good and that God would allow him to be treated the way that he's been treated, and that God would allow him to stay gay when he didn't want to stay gay. My son is very passive, very people pleasing. He doesn't like to stand out, very quiet, introverted. And so he almost felt in the beginning like he was given this thing that was going to make him rejected, and it was going to make others, not accept him. And so he really couldn't reconcile how God could be good and have that. Many of our LGBT loved ones feel that same exact way for different reasons. So they may blame God for that negative personal experience. It's hard to blame them for this, because this is something that's happening to each and every person. But as a parent, it can feel very much like, oh my gosh, if they're walking away from their faith, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to react to it? How can I get them back to faith with God? It can feel like we need to have control over it. And that can be one of the worst things that we can do. When they're young, we can have a lot of control when they're little and discipline them and that kind of thing. But as they get older, we lose that control, which is probably a good thing. I'm sure they feel it's a good thing. But what we get is influence, sorry, I forgot to mention this. To us, sometimes it can feel so scary that they're not just walking away from their church or their beliefs, but even worse, they're walking away from their eternity. So we can really turn to control to try to figure that out and try to get them back. But we all we have as they get older is influence. And the thing about influence is it's gained really slow. We have to put in a lot of reps to gain influence with our loved ones, but we can make one small move and lose all of it. So it's really important for us to understand what it is we can do to encourage our loved one, I guess, back toward their faith. So we have to become, the safest parents to let them question or have doubts. We may have to be so safe that we allow them to walk away from their faith, to have a chance of them coming back to a faith of their own. This is incredibly difficult. For me, there were many times where Amy and I would have discussions of, why can't God allow him to see him? Why can't God let him see and experience? It's his will that all come to know him, right? That's what scripture says. And so why in the world won't he show him some experience that my son Noah wants to come back to him? And I really got to a place that was pretty cynical. And I even questioned, why are you sacrificing my son so that I can have more understanding and more love with other parents and comforting others and really just understanding what they're going through? And I got so cynical. I got to a point where I was like, well, you know what? You sacrificed your son. Why wouldn't you sacrifice mine? And it was a really, really hard place to be. But I got through it. I'm not saying I'm in the same place I was before. I'm in a totally different place with totally different thoughts and beliefs about things. But I had to let go of my son. I had to surrender kind of him over to God and know, okay, he's got this, and I can't control this anyway, even if I want to try. But I have to let him walk away from his faith so that there's even a chance of him coming back. Because what I know about parenting is the more we try to control something or the more we resist, the longer it takes and the harder it is. So if you can get to that place of letting go, the quicker the better. It's going to be really good for us. But there are some things that we can do, and there is some encouragement because 76% of the people that left the faith community surveyed said they would be willing to return, which is compared to 9% of the average Americans. So that's a huge difference. So 76% just really want to know, hey, if you treat me well, if you love me, pretty much those were their reasons. I might consider coming back to the faith. You don't even necessarily have to change your beliefs, but you need to treat me well and show me that you love me. So this is the way we do that. Our demonstration of faith better be better than our explanation of faith. We have to be a demonstration of faith, not an explanation of faith. And what I mean by that is it's our actions. It's not our words. It's not hard questions that we're dealing with. It is hard experiences that we're dealing with. So our hard questions or our hard answers to their questions are not going to bring them back to faith. It's going to be healing from bad experiences, because you can't logic someone into something that they emotioned their way out of. Let me say that again. You can't logic someone, because we think it's all about talking, and we think it's all about like, how can we explain to them about Jesus and all of these things to get them back to him. And they went through a bad experience, so they need healing. They don't need your hard questions and your hard answers. So we're not competing with tough questions, but rather tough experiences. This next part, there's this book called I Once Was Lost, and it talks about these 5 thresholds that people go through when they become a Christian. These are not things we have control over. These are not circumstances that we're responsible for, but they're just observances of what doors did people go through when they were becoming a Christian. And the very first one, and you can look at this book too, it's really, really interesting, but the very first one was to trust a Christian. They had to trust a Christian in order to, enter into faith in God. And the problem with that, as many of you know, is that most LGBTQ plus folks do not trust Christians, especially right now. Right now, the Christian evangelicals, if you want to say, they are saying things that are very harmful to your kids, to your loved ones. And so trusting a Christian is about the last thing our loved ones want to do. And it's understandable.
Hey, Debbie,
So, yeah,
sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind going back a slide real quick?
sure. No, I don't mind, actually.
Thank you. Just for a split second.
Yeah.
These are such good truths. We have some parents that want to take some screenshots. So,
okay. So just so you remember, for those of you who have your Mentimeter up, hopefully this is going to be on your presentation that you'll be able to keep at the end too. But we can also email this presentation to anybody that requests it. So we are certainly willing to do that.
Thank you. I didn't want to interrupt you. I just wanted to honor that request, but then I figured
Sure.
we could make that explanation. So if anybody wants to see future slides, you'll have that option to access it.
Right. So anyway, so trusting a Christian is important. So one of the ways that we can be a demonstration, of our faith is to live love. Paul gives us sort of an idea in Galatians 5:6 when he says, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the answer is love. Our demonstration of faith better be better than our explanation of faith. Our demonstration of faith is love. One of the ways I got to see this was a pretty powerful experience that I went through. The first year my son came out, I decided I was going to go to the Pride Parade. And this was a big deal for me because my son broke every paradigm there was of a gay person for me. I used to think that a gay person wanted to shove their agenda in our face, that they were loud, and that they were very sinful. And I'm trying to think of other adjectives to describe it. I felt like they were trying to take me down a road that I didn't want to go down, and that they were aggressive. And the Pride Parade was about the last place I wanted to go prior to my son coming out. So when he came out, I wanted to go. I really wanted to understand. And so when I walked up, we live here in Atlanta, and I walked off of our MARTA, which is our train system. And it's at a part of the parade where you come to kind of like a crossroads where the parade is turning a corner. And the very first thing I saw was Westboro Baptist Church and their megaphones and their signs, very, very hateful signs, things that were being said out of the megaphone I can't even repeat. It was pretty traumatizing for me as a mom of a gay son that I adore. And I just remember bawling. Like, I literally lost it. I was all by myself because nobody could come with me this year. And so I made the mistake of coming to the Pride Parade by myself. It was extremely traumatizing to see all of those signs. And so I am just bawling like you can't even imagine. And finally called a friend who happened to be there that was across the street, and they came to me and I just held me in their arms. It was an LGBT friend of mine named Aaron, and he just held me in his arms, and it was just so loving. And I just remember looking at the parade and going, you know what? I've been afraid of these people for so long, and all I can see now are a people to be loved. I mean, even the guy in his underwear, I'm like, he just wants to be loved. He's not trying to shove his agenda in my face. Not that we don't have fanatic everything. But if they are trying to shove their agenda in your face, I see it more as they're coming out of shame, and they want to be loved, and they're tired of being in this direction. So they've gone all the way in the other direction. And I just have such compassion now. So this story was really, really powerful to me. This was in the book, Us Versus Us, which is from the Marin Foundation study that I mentioned earlier. So I just wanted to show you this. Many of you have seen this picture before, because it's pretty famous, but I will always love it and wanted to share it with you. And I just wanted to share with you, what Nathan Albert wrote about this picture and about this experience, because he's the one that's hugging the man in his underwear. So I'm just going to read this to you so that you can see the power in it as well. He says, I spent the day at Chicago's Pride Parade. Some friends and I, with the Marin Foundation, wore shirts with "I'm sorry" written on it. We had signs that said, I'm sorry that Christians judge you. I'm sorry the way the churches have treated you. I used to be a Bible-banging homophobe. Sorry. We wanted to be an alternative Christian voice from the protesters that were speaking hate into megaphones. So my experience exactly. What I loved most about the day is when people got it. I loved watching people's faces as they saw our shirts, read the signs, and looked back at us. Responses were incredible. Some people blew us kisses, some hugged us, some screamed, thank you. A couple ladies walked up and said we were the best thing they had seen all day. I wish I had counted how many people hugged me. One guy in particular softly said, well, I forgive you. Watching people recognize our apology brought me to tears many times. It was reconciliation personified. My favorite, though, was a gentleman who was dancing on a float. He was dressed solely in white underwear and had a pack of abs like no one else. As he was dancing on the float, he noticed us and jokingly yelled, "What are you sorry for? It's Pride." I pointed to our signs and watched him read them. Then it clicked. Then he got it. He stopped dancing. He looked at all of us standing there. A look of utter seriousness came across his face. And as the float passed us, he jumped off of it and ran toward us. In all of his sweaty, beautiful abs of steel, he hugged me and whispered, "Thank you." Before I had even let go, another guy ran up to me, kissed me on the cheek, and gave me the biggest bear hug ever. I almost had the wind knocked out of me. It was one of those hugs. I wish I was there to see this, because this was my experience at the Pride Parade as well. I just wanted so badly to hug every single person that was walking by in front of me. So what can we get from all of this, as we navigate this journey with our kids, and recognizing that they've walked away from their faith because of a bad church experience, or maybe they've walked away because what they've been told about faith or Christianity, or maybe they've been, just really they've watched their friends be really treated badly. It can be for lots of different reasons, but some of the things that we can do to at least courage them back to faith. And this is not necessarily back to church. This is back to faith in God, because sometimes it's too hard to go back to church because of the pain that has been caused. The first thing we can do is just to listen. We do a lot of talking, we do a lot of explaining, and sometimes we need to just be able to listen to them talk about and express what they believe. And, we can learn from Jesus on this. He was asked 183 questions, and he only answered 3 of them directly. That's pretty quiet. The second thing we can do is to empathize. We don't do a lot of this. We differ with our kids a lot of times on politics and race and this topic, LGBTQ plus. But when do we ever try to empathize and say, I wonder why they believe what they believe about that particular policy in politics, or I wonder why they feel the way that they feel. And, ask them maybe a question like, what led you to this view, rather than why. Why is very threatening. So we can empathize with them and try to put ourselves in their shoes, and maybe even say, you know what, I can understand why you would feel that way. I can understand why you would believe that way. And then the third thing I've already mentioned several times, and that is to love. When you say love unconditionally, but when you say something, always ask yourself, is what about to come out of my mouth going to push them further away from God or closer to God? Is it going to push them further away to trusting me or building influence, or is it going to bring them closer to that? And then really recognize whether it should come out of your mouth anyway. But lastly, your demonstration of faith better be better. I've had slides for all of these, and I got so carried away, I didn't even pay attention to my slides. Your demonstration of faith better be better than your explanation of faith. It's just really, really critical that you show them love. Amy, did you want to spend some time talking about purpose? Or did you want to go straight into some questions?
Yeah, we have about 15 minutes left. So I'll just end things with just an encouraging word. And then we can take some of your questions that you guys can type in either the chat or the Q&A. If you have questions related to any of this content and how it applies to your situation, regarding safety, faith, grief, we would love to hear your questions, but I just want to end by reminding you all as parents that there's great purpose in this for you guys on your journey. And I'm going to read this to you quickly, and then we'll go into your questions. There is great purpose in this for you. This may have been a surprise to you. This was not a surprise to God. God has entrusted you to be the parent or loved one of your LGBTQ plus child. Because God has entrusted you, he will continue to equip you. You are not a perfect parent, but you are the perfect parent for your child. This journey is as much about you as it is about your child. There is great purpose in this for you. God is still love. God is still good. When you are tired, he promises to be your rest. When you are lonely, he promises to be with you always. When you are restless, he promises to be your peace. When you are afraid, he promises to be your safe refuge. When you are weak, he promises to be your strength. When you are grieving, he promises to be your comfort. When you are confused, he promises to be your truth. When you are inadequate, he promises to be enough. He is with you. He loves you. There's great purpose in this for you. So I hope that's encouraging. And with that, if anybody has any questions, we can go to the chat. We can go to the Q&A, and we'll just give it a minute if somebody wants to type it in. While people are writing their questions, I'll just share this, since I believe it was posted to everybody. That one of the couples that's watching made a great point, is that there are new events in this process that bring up grief again in their story. So they gave the example of their daughter has been in a same-sex marriage for 14 years. We came to full acceptance. We love our daughter-in-law, enjoy their family, and suddenly they are separating and headed for divorce. So they are devastated, obviously, and they are going through a whole new experience of grief. So this is actually very common. It's very similar to LGBTQ plus individuals who will realize and share that the coming out process really never ends. It just morphs. And the same can be true for parents with not only the coming out process on behalf of their child, but also with their grief. As the story unfolds, it can open up new areas that will need to be grieved that you did not anticipate. So thank you for sharing that. That is a great point. One attendee would like our email addresses. So I am fine with that. I can share my email address. Mine is ARB, F as in family, AM. What is my email address? ARB, ARBFAM 774 @gmail. So you can get me there. Debbie, did you want to share an email?
I'm putting them in the chat.
That would be much easier than trying to enunciate it.
And mine is debbie.causey@northpoint.org. And then I have Amy's there as well, ARBFAM774 @gmail.com.
Yeah, so feel free, those you can reach us at those email addresses. And I'm not seeing any more questions come up. So I will check the chat one more time here, or the Q&A, I mean. But somebody said, thank you so much. Such an empowering session. Thank you, guys. That's what we want it to be. And if you guys have thoughts too, it doesn't have to be a question. You can share a thought. Somebody said, wonderful presentation. All right, we're not paying you guys to say these things. We really want your questions. So thank you for the encouragement though. Yvonne, appreciate it. But if there are any questions, we'll give it just a couple more minutes. One person, Yvonne, said, you made me tear up. This is so helpful. Well, our goal is to make every single attendee cry. So you're welcome. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm glad it was helpful to you. So,
Jen has a question.
okay.
I don't see it yet, but
Yeah, she's typing.
typing.
So we'll wait. No rush. We have about 10 more minutes that we can hang out.
And I think they recorded these sessions, so you should be able to watch them later to answer you, Holly.
Somebody wants to know where they can get the study that you mentioned, the Marion study.
Oh, it's a book. It's called Us Versus Us. It's
Marin.
the Marin Foundation, Maren. Andrew Marin is the author, Us Versus Us. And the book is the entire study. So it's written in a book format. So that I would highly recommend that. Okay, here comes Jen's question.
Take it, Debbie.
How do you advise someone to navigate around others in their church who are not supportive of parents of an LGBTQ plus child? I don't know if I understand the question.
If I understand it the way it's written, you're talking about people in the church who are not supportive of parents of LGBTQ plus children. Is that correct? Okay, yeah. My initial response, and I'm sure there's very nuanced, depending on the situation and what's going on, but I would be less concerned about them and more concerned about the parents themselves. So I would probably, if you're gonna put time and energy into a group of people in your church, I would focus on the hurting and the ones that are being, whether it's being mistreated or feel like they're not getting the support that they need. I would focus on them, because my personal experience in a non-affirming church has been that it takes it's a long journey for a lot of religious leaders to, or even just people in the church to, it was long for me. I had a very different belief system based on what I was taught when I was growing up. And it probably took me about 4 years to come to be somebody who is safe. So not to say to give up on them, but I would focus more on the parents themselves than on the church members who are not supportive. But Debbie, if you have any more helpful thoughts on for the church members.
Well, it says navigate around others, and this is something that made, Jen very angry, and we get that all the time. I think it's to encourage those parents to have that inner circle to, you're going to grow a pretty tough skin. And unfortunately, that's through microaggressions and hard things that you'll experience as parents as well. But they need to have an inner circle. And then sometimes I just tell them, hey, our church might not be a safe place for you. I want you to be in a safe spot. So it just depends on those parents and how, how much they're willing to kind of take on. But if they're in a situation where it's constant, I would want to get them out of there, or at least have an inner circle that can be supportive of them, including you, being part of that inner circle. But yeah, we can't protect others. Unfortunately, I wish I could. We can't protect our LGBTQ plus community. I wish we could. I work for a very large church. So I'm in this all the time, in this situation. And you're right, it's not fun. And I experience it myself. I'll be going throughout the day, and I work in a care department here, and somebody will say something that they don't know I'm a parent and of an LGBT plus person. And it'll just stab me in the heart. It's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. I was vulnerable. And then all of a sudden they say something and just stabs me in the heart. And so I have to process that. And I have to figure out, how much of that can I be around on a regular basis, and who are my friends that I can process that with. And that's why it's so important to us that we have a ministry called Parent Connect, where we can be supportive. Parent Connect is for parents of LGBTQ plus loved ones. So we have that support with one another, but many churches don't have that. So if you don't have that and you want something like that, we are partners with a ministry called Embracing the Journey. I meant to mention that with you. And they have groups that are virtual for parents and from all over the country. And so if you need to be a part of an inner circle and you can't find anybody, I highly recommend Embracing the Journey. It's their website is embracingthejourney.org.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a great question. And unfortunately, it's really the most prevalent thing that happens if you are LGBTQ plus in the church or the parents in the church.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually pretty much the norm that you are going to experience some form of that. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, we've got 5 minutes. So probably time for one more question if anybody has it or comment.
We are starting a parent group virtually in Canada called Clearly Love to talk about affirming theology. So that's a great resource.
Do you guys have a web page, or how do we find you? Or are you public yet or no? Clearly Love.
More power to you guys. Parent Connect, we try to run down the middle lane because we've got conservative parents or traditional, I guess, view parents and affirming parents all mixed together. And so one thing we do in Parent Connect is focus on loving our kids well and finding out where God has us on the journey. So it's really, really tough because we don't focus on theology. We certainly encourage you to have theology, and that's a journey we believe you have with God and working through that journey. But wow, that's amazing that you guys are focusing on that.
Go Canada.
We're on Facebook and we have an email address, admin@clearlylove.org. So anybody that's interested in that, you have it right there in the chat.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Anybody else?
Thank you guys so much for being here and giving us some time today. I hope you enjoy the conference. Like Amy said, if anybody wants to reach out to us, you have our email address to jot down. And I think you can even ask us some questions in the WOVA app. I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly or if it's WOVA. And we're happy to respond that way as well. And thank you to our interpreters and Nathaniel, our tech person that's kept us going here. We appreciate you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Whoville.